Welcome to the session on sustainable agriculture, tackling the regenerative transition. In this session, we go back to the basics, upstream of the food chain, where farmers produce the nutritious food within the planetary boundaries, and that requires a serious transition. We can call the next generation of farm practices regenerative agriculture, with respect for the biosphere integrity, careful for the soil, crop diversity and integrated livestock. You can also name it agroecology, organic farming or circular agriculture. But that will not be the discussion of this afternoon. This afternoon we will focus on the new economics with novel business cases. Farmers need to be fully supported to provide services that are demanded by society and market, to adopt the regenerative practices in the transition of the European food system. This includes developing innovative technologies enabling the regenerative agriculture, training of farmers on their use, but also adequate financial rewards to farmers for the uptake of regenerative practices. And of course, a full commitment of the supply chain and the consumer awareness to help generate the market pool for these practices. My name is Martin Scholte. I'm advisor of the Wageningen Aarhus University, and I'm the moderator of this afternoon. We have asked 5 panelists to share with you their views around 3 questions. What kind of innovative solutions can help farmers in the transition towards regenerative practices? What are the most appropriate financial rewards to offer farmers? And what initiatives can be generated in the supply chain or in the consumer pool that can help the upscaling of regenerative agriculture? You as public are invited to come up with your questions, your remarks, your comments based on what you hear from the panelists. After the 5 panelists, we will have a half an hour discussion on the basis of your chats. So please provide your comments in the chat, and at a discussion we will use your chats as the guidance for the discussion. Let me start with the first speaker of this session, and that is Sierko Bumela. She's from Finland. She is a regenerative carbon farming in the south of Finland, producing cereals, fava bean and caraway. She's actively participating in a carbon action network as one of 100 farmers organized by the Baltic Sea Action Group. And good to tell, in this almost Christmas time, last year they had the first brew of a Christmas beer in Finland, based on malting their barley originating from regenerative agricultural practices. Sierko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I am Sierko Bumela, a carbon farmer from southern Finland. I run our family farm with my spouse Patrick, and we produce our cereals and other crops to the Finnish food chain. And I will now shortly describe our transition towards regenerative farming, and I will also tell you about the action that is already taking place here in Finland. Next slide, please. So, almost 4 years ago, we heard of a platform called Carbon Action that was founded by Baltic Sea Action Group. The platform brings together scientists, farmers, companies, advisors, and decision makers to work together to develop and research ways of carbon sequestration and verifying the results scientifically. The idea of co-creation and knowledge sharing excited us, and we felt it was fresh thinking to bring the testing to farm level and to find practices that farmers could easily implement to their management. We knew right away that we wanted to be part of this, so we joined the platform as one of 100 pilot farms. During the years, Carbon Action platform has expanded as many more scientists and companies have joined and knowledge is shared wider and wider within the farming community. Working towards healthy soils has been and is at the core of everything we do on our farm. We believe the soil is the solution. Changing our management towards regenerative farming included the adoption of cover crops to our diverse crop rotation. By maximizing the amount of green weeks, we maximize soil cover and photosynthesis. At the same time, living roots stabilize the soil structure and feed the microbial population in the soil. A fine example of a win-win-win situation that benefits the soil, the farmer, and the planet. Next slide, please. I would argue that the transition is mostly about changing your mindset. Secondly, comes the courage and willingness to take action, and the rest is about trial and error and about continuous learning. We do not use cover crops to earn subsidies, but we see the multiple benefits they bring with them. We understand now that it's not only about what we do, but more importantly, about how we do it. We have tried and tested multiple methods and timings of seeding our cover crops and learned to design more diverse cover crop mixes. Taking part in Carbon Action has helped us enormously to take these steps. In the community, we are sharing knowledge and experiences and learning from each other. The first steps we took were really small, but thanks to the support and motivation from the group, we have had the courage to experiment boldly without fear of failure and scale up our best practices. Next slide, please. I believe that the rewards offered to farmers for the uptake of regenerative farming practices should be diverse and flexible, so that each farmer could choose the practices and rewards that best match their farming management. In addition to subsidies, I hope that a fair share of revenue could derive from the market as a result of value creation. And I know many farmers have high hopes on carbon credits and their potential to create additional income streams. And I was happy to hear that this is no longer something to wait for in the future, but that such programs already are running, as we will hear later from Soil Capital. I would also encourage the whole food chain to co-creation and working closely together. I'm sure we all want to feel included and actively take part in the change with others in the value chain, together creating respect and appreciation towards the work we do. In crop production, soil is our number one capital, and therefore we need to take care of it. Investments in soil health improve productivity and bottom line. As emphasized before, soil is the solution. Healthy soils generate health and well-being to us all. And next, my final slide, please. The change is happening, and I believe that when there is a will, there is a way. As mentioned earlier by Martin, this autumn, Sinebrikov, a Finnish brewery, launched the first regeneratively produced beer in Finland. The barley to this traditional Christmas beer originated from our farm. It was malted by Viking Malt, and the production was audited by Baltic Sea Action Group. This, to me, is strong evidence of the power of collaboration and the fact that there already is supply chain pull from the companies and also interest amongst the consumers. Creating an open and transparent value chain, telling the consumers what we are doing and how we are taking steps towards a more sustainable future are key factors at this stage. Let's embrace collaboration and take action together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sierko. for for sharing your interesting story on your farm. And I assume there will be questions in the public. They put it on chat, and we come back to that in the discussion. But now we go from the upstream of the food chain to downstream the food chain, and we have Roberto Conte with us. Roberto from Italy is an R&D scientist in a winery processing industry in Caviro. He uses his experience in sustainable and agriculture and green chemistry to come up with projects about circular economy and sustainable agriculture with the wine producers. And also, we said it already, a circular fertilization in that. Roberto, the floor is yours to tell your side of the story.
Okay, thank you, Martin, for the floor. So, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Roberto Conte. I'm from Caviro. It's the largest winery group in Italy. And now I'm going to show you the Black to the Future is our project co-funded by EIT Food. Next slide, please. So, to introduce this topic, I think it's important to remember that 21st century's social and environmental challenges are highly related to land use, climate change, and the food system. And all these aspects together can affect the human health. And talking about soil, it's well known that everybody that we need to reduce soil depletion, especially in the Mediterranean area, because it's the most exposed to the risk of desertification. For instance, in Italy, 10% of the national territory is considered highly vulnerable, and almost the 50% of them are of medium vulnerability. So we think that regenerative agriculture, sequestering carbon, can reverse the climate change. But what does Caviro have to do with this? Next slide. As mentioned before, Caviro is a large winery group in Italy, and our core business is to produce wine. We work together with 12,000 wine growers, and we cover 36,000 hectares of vineyards in the whole country. So it's quite easy to understand why we are so related to the soil issues, also considering the mutual collaboration with farmers. Next slide, please. What we did and what we are doing every day is to change our paradigm from a linear economy to a circular economy. Indeed, our circularity starts from vineyards, and after harvesting the grapes and producing wine, we have several tons of plant waste. Next, please. And from plant waste, we can use it for several applications, such as obtaining bioenergy or noble products, such as a proper biorefinery. But in addition, we can produce also natural fertilizer. Next, please. Natural fertilizer, mainly compost, that go back to the soil again. Next, please. We produce fertilizer, and our business has sharply grown in the last 10 years from 5,000 tons per year in the 1995, next please, to 50,000 tons per year in the 2021. But in addition, in the next slide, please, with the R&D unit to which I belong, we work in innovative projects in environment and circular economy topics, such as Black to the Future. Now I'm going to show you. Next, please. Black to the Future aims to develop an advanced mixture of biochar, so carbon obtained by pyrolysis of wood waste and organic waste, and compost. We call it CB mix, in order to reduce soil depletion, increase carbon capture, and improve the plant yield. What we want to do also is create a business model, and to do that, we need to define the barriers and limitations to current use of compost, and we need to understand customer segments, market channels, And moreover, we need to understand the cost production and, of course, the price to the CB mix. Next, please. So briefly, our wet plane consists in application of CB mix in 3 sites in the rich areas, South Italy, Cyprus, and Spain, where we used 3 different cultures: olive tree, pomegranates, and grapes, of course. And in addition, in Belgium, thanks to Urban Cup Solution, an innovative startup that is going to test CB mix in indoor vertical agriculture. And finally, we are doing a survey to farmers in order to understand their needs. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to show you briefly some results of the effect of CB mix on soil and plant, and how you can see the total organic carbon and phosphorus bioavailability with CB mix increase significantly respect to biochar and compost alone, or much better if we consider the soil as it is. Next slide. And in terms of vine plants, we observed an increase, honestly less significant, but anyway, in terms of number of bunch or bunch weight or grape per plant, we observed an increase with our mixture. In the next slide, we are talking about the business model, and to do that, we think that we need to engage farmers. And the best way is to give back the CB mix to the farmers who supply feedstock in order to obtain it. This can be one kind of reward system. The other way is to give the carbon credits for CO2 sequestration to the farmers who use the biochar, thinking that the 1 kilo of biochar can store 3 kilograms of CO2 in the soil. In addition, using CB mix can enhance the sustainable agriculture point of view within the farm-to-fork strategy, and moreover can increase the circularity of the farms that aspire to an organic and sustainable agriculture. Next slide. But the point is, what do farmers think? As mentioned before, we made a questionnaire to farmers, and the first results show that farmers are willing to spend maximum 24 euro per tons. Now they pay more or less in Italy 10-15 euros per ton for the compost. But the main problem is that only the 26% of farmers already know biochar, and the 14% of farmers don't know neither compost nor biochar. Next slide. So in conclusion, the CB mix, we think, can be highly useful for marginal land recovery. And in addition, we think that our business model can involve directly the farmers, and so could be a sustainable business model. And we would like to increase also farmers' awareness on regenerative agriculture and sustainable practices. And thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Roberto, for your integrative concept where you really make the circle around in your business. And yeah, it has to bring money. And that's on both sides, on the farmer side, in the agribusiness side, and it requires cooperation from farmer to processor and to the retail. That brings me to the next speaker, and the next speaker is Andrew Foisey. Andrew is a green agronomist. That means a green agroeconomy person. He knows all about capital, financial capital, but he also knows a lot about the soil capital. He is initiator of the first certified multinational carbon payment program for farmers named Soil Capital Carbon. Andrew, your vision on the credibility of regenerative practices.
Thank you very much, Martin, for the introduction, and to the organizers for such an important conversation today. Having heard such tangible and inspirational examples before me from the speakers, my focus now is going to be on answering the question, how can we persuade and motivate many thousands of farmers to go in a similar direction? And so I'm going to introduce today Soil Capital Carbon to do just that. Next slide, please. To start by introducing my company, Soil Capital, we are an independent agronomy firm focused on developing technology solutions that advance regenerative and climate positive agriculture. We're headquartered in Belgium. We have a team of nearly 30. We've been around for nearly 10 years, and throughout that journey, we have always focused on helping farmers store more carbon in their soils, while also improving their farm profitability. And seeing that connection between the environmental performance of the farm and its economic performance, for us, is really central to the idea of how do we take these practices that put carbon back in the soil, that regenerate soil health, to scale. Next slide, please. While we've been working with farmers, we have observed in our own practice that it is possible to improve farm profitability and soil health hand in hand from the beginning of a transition. But if that is possible, it raises the question, if that's true and if that's possible, why are all farmers not doing this? And the answer is brought to us and clarified by this study done by a French bank. It aligns very closely with what we know in practice as well. Farmers very often lack confidence in implementing new practices. They fear economic loss from a transition, and they don't see the market being ready to reward them for taking such risks as changing their fundamental farming practices. These are all legitimate and powerful barriers that hold farmers back, and our business is now focused on addressing those barriers head on. Next slide, please. And what we've done is launch a carbon payment program called Soil Capital Carbon that answers these needs directly. Next slide, please. When farmers think about being paid for carbon or being paid for farming practices that improve the carbon stored in their soil, they often see 4 related problems, and we try to tackle those directly in a holistic package. They don't know how to measure carbon, so we work with an easy carbon calculator that answers that question for them. They don't know how to prove in a credible way that they have made climate positive improvements to their farming practices. We have developed a protocol aligned with an ISO standard that allows them to prove that in a way that is verified by third-party auditors. They don't know how to access the carbon markets to actually sell that carbon. We have partnered with a carbon markets expert business called South Pole to do just that. And last but not least, they often lack the knowledge and the insights on how to make a success of their practice change. And we provide analytics and benchmarking that addresses that directly. Next slide, please. This program that I'm describing is live, it's operational. It was launched actually in 2020, in the summer in 2020. It targeted initially farmers in France and Belgium, arable farmers. And in our first season, we signed up 150 or so farmers, representing some 35,000 hectares. We've now brought the program to the UK as well, and we're expecting a significant growth over this winter season that we're currently in right now. And as you can see on the right, the program is well supported by a network of partners, some of whom are buying the carbon certificates that are generated by the farmers, companies like AB InBev, Cargill. Others are engaging with us because they have significant portfolios of farmers as clients. An example there being Century Farming in the UK, which is a farm advisory and farm management business. So we're partnering with those kinds of organizations to take this program to their farmers. Next slide, please. How does this process work? Well, in a nutshell, in a very simple way, it all, of course, starts with the farmers themselves, who are making practice changes that reduce their emissions and store more carbon in their soil. That's point one. Step two, point two, is where our protocol and our digital platform come in. We analyze, we quantify, and we verify the improvements that the farmers make, and we generate for them carbon certificates against the ISO standard that we use in our protocol. Point three, companies then step in and purchase those carbon certificates in order to benefit from the verified claims that those certificates enable. And point four, whether they're paying in pounds or euros, they generate, of course, a revenue which is flowed back to the farmers to create a strong financial incentive for taking the risk of changing practices in the first place. Next slide, please. It matters a great deal to us that this activity of generating carbon certificates and improvements can add value within the crop supply chains. Next slide, please. And so I'm just going to finish with two simple case studies, actually both focusing on beer, to build, Sierko, on your earlier case study. This one starts in Belgium, where a small group of farmers, just 10 initially, were working with some microbreweries in the craft beer market. And initially, they were focused purely on regenerative specifications for the production of the barley going into the beer. The interest from the breweries has grown over time, and you can see the volume figures slowly increasing through the years there. And what the brewers have discovered is that the consumer is willing to pay a premium for regeneratively produced barley. Now what we see is those brewers are requiring the farmers to get certified with soil capital carbon in order to demonstrate and prove the carbon gains that they're achieving with their regenerative practices. Next slide, please. And at the other end of the chain, if you like, this is a quote that was publicized by AB InBev, the world's largest brewer, who we now have a strong partnership with. It's in French there. And effectively what it's saying is that it's recognizing the value of the carbon certificates that Soil Capital is generating with farmers in the AB InBev supply chain. We're working through their accelerator program to test and bring to market at scale the carbon certificate approach from very many more barley producers across France and Belgium. So I hope that gives some interesting insights for the discussion later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for your story with new insights, and good to see that it can work, and quite convincing, I have to say. We see how the public will respond to your statements and your vision you shared with us. Your not vision, your practical example, I have to say. Thank you. Well, we were in the north of Europe, we were in the south of Europe, we were in the northwest of Europe. Now we go to Europe, to Brussels, with Emmanuel Pietel. Emmanuel, he is policy coordinator, amongst other things, for green agriculture at the Directorate General Agri for the European Commission. And Emmanuel, all these stories, do they fit in the European Commission's ambitions? I think you can tell us more about that. You will tell us more about that.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks a lot, Martin, for introduction. Yes, yes. My purpose is to provide you some, I would say, indication on the role of EU public policy as regards CAP, Common Agriculture Policy, in direction of the soil protection and in direction to encourage farmer community to move forward to soil sustainable management. But I see there is on the ground a lot of initiative, and I'm pleased to see that. Next slide, please. Yes, it's just to remind in the fact our CAP is regularly put into question, and we have just negotiate a new reform, and it took time. We start by a proposal in 2018, and we have achieved recently an outcome between co-legislator, European Parliament, Commission, and Council, and we achieved this outcome at the end of June this week, 2021. And this outcome has been endorsed last week in European plenary. A new CAP will be in place from 1st January 23. And there is still a year 22 for a dialogue with member states and to implement their CAP plan. But next slide, I will move to the next slide. Yes, it's just to remind, in fact, the CAP has been discussed in a new context. This new context has been designed by the college, a new college of commissioners, which was higher in 2019, and they have released a Green Deal at the end of 2019. This Green Deal has been supplemented by two strategies, farm to fork and biodiversity strategy. And as you see, some targets to be achieved by 2030 will guide the new CAP implementation. There is some significant target on the reduction of some input like plant protection product or nutrient, and there is a willingness to increase organic farming. And beside this EU Green Deal target, there is an EU commitment to reduce by 55% of greenhouse gas emission and to get climate neutrality by 2050. And this last, I would say, objective will I would say involve agriculture and especially the soil management, and as we try to demonstrate today. Next slide. The CAP objective has been further clarified, and they should fit with the new Green Deal objective. And among 9 specific objectives, there are specific objectives on climate change and environmental care. There is a specific objective 4 as regard the contribution to climate change and mitigation and adaptation, and there is a specific objective 5. Is just to foster sustainable development and efficient management of natural resources, and soil is involved in that. And we have an SO 6 is to preserve and the biodiversity at the farm level. Next slide. Sorry. Yes, in order to address this specific objective, we have defined a new green architecture. And this new green architecture is based on relevant instruments. In the right side, you will see there is a balance between conditionality. Enhanced conditionality is a mandatory requirement to be respected by farmers. And on the top of that, there is a voluntary practice to be supported by additional payment when farmers commit to go further step. As regard additional payment, you have 2 types of budget. One support in relation with the programming set under Pillar 2 for climate and environmental action, agro-environmental commitment. And beside this Pillar 2, I would say budget, there is a new opportunity via Eco Scheme. Eco Scheme will represent at least 25% of direct payment support under Pillar 1. There will, in this budget, is massive budget, and there is an opportunity in a way to encourage farmers to go via a more sustainable practice. It's important to underline on the fact some practice to be supported in eco scheme on the pillar 2 will be designed beyond requirements set on the conditionality. That means conditionality will constitute a baseline applicable across Europe for all member states. And next slide, I will go more in detail on the scope of conditionality. The scope of conditionality will include some requirements, some requirement in relation with existing EU law, like the Nitrate Directive, but as well in relation with some standards, GAEC, Good Agricultural Environmental Condition, and GAEC will be defined by member states. And here there is a list of 9 GAEC, and this 9 GAEC, we are in a new CAP regulation. And as you see, this GAEC will address some topic, and there is a GAEC in relation with the soil. And there is a GAEC on tillage management to reduce soil erosion, GAEC on minimum soil cover to avoid bare soil. And there is another GAEC, it's not in the graph here, is a GAEC on crop rotation. There will be 3 GAEC in relation with the soil concern. And this GAEC should be defined by member state. And I think it will be a good step after to go on the eco scheme on the pillar 2. Does that mean member state will have the responsibility to further define all elements on the greening architecture based on their own context? And next slide. Sorry, next slide, please. Yeah. For this purpose, there is a strategic planning, and this strategic planning has foreseen and including different steps to be observed by member states. We ask member states to start by a SWOT analysis to identify their context and their weaknesses and their opportunity. Next step is to have a need assessment and to have some ranking about the need as regards environmental and climate concern at member state level, and to design some region or not, and to set an intervention strategy. And when the member states will set intervention strategy, they need to make some articulation between some GAEC standards and what they will select as regards some intervention, some practices to be supported by eco scheme or by ICM on the pillar 2. For each intervention, they will have a budget allocated, and they will set some target to be achieved in the coming year during the program. The target to be achieved it will be number of hectares impacted by the intervention. It's just to provide you in a way the full picture about the methodology and the strategic planning when we will work with member states. We have delivered in 2020 recommendation anyway in this context. For the next slide is just to come back at more on issue on soil management. Just to be more concrete, in fact, in relation of, as you see in the slide, we remind some specific objective on climate and mitigation adaptation, is specific objective 4 and specific objective 5 for sustainable management of natural resources and including soil. And in relation to that, we put as an example, as an indication, some recommendation, what we have given to some member states in relation with the soil or the management of the land, arable land, grassland, for example. And after here, we have as well a need identified by member state. And sometimes there is a need as regards, for example, enhancing carbon storage and sequestration, or protection and improvement of soil and reduction of land use for residual and transport area. It's just to underline in the need as identified by member states, there will be a lot of concern on the soil. And in this context, member state will have the duty to define the GAEC. As you see, the GAEC 3, 5, 7, the GAEC in relation with the soil. And on the right side for the slide, you will have some intervention. And here we put as an example some intervention in relation with eco scheme. We put 3 eco scheme, IS1 and IS2 and IS3, and we put some agro-environmental commitment, ICM1, ICM2, and ICM3. Just to give you some flavor on that, some eco scheme, for example, will foster the green cover during autumn and winter. We will try to improve as well the crop diversification and to increase the number of crops to be used at the farm level. And based on ICM, we will maybe to encourage conservative agriculture, including some tillage management, reduction of tillage, of no tillage. It's just to show you, in fact, based on the greening architecture and based on the various instruments, we will be able to tackle some soil issue, and we can address some concrete example as you have already presented in your context. For the next slide, I will say yes, today member states have the duty to prepare their CAP plan, and the Commission is in dialogue with member states, and we provide as much possible support for member states. And the CAP plan will be approved by the Commission during the next year, and we will try to be transparent. All CAP plan will be made public next year. And I will maybe extend my presentation by the research innovation, because research innovation is will take a role as well in the future. We have 9 billion for research innovation, and in the context of this research innovation, next slide, we have set a new approach as regards mission on soil. There will be a mission on the soil. Next slide, on a mission on the soil deal for Europe. Mission is a portfolio of action with some goal to be achieved, and in relation with the different stakeholders, and to provide some outcomes for the policymaker at the European level. And in this soil mission, we will have an interaction with a soil strategy developed by DG Env, I think, our direction on environmental issue, and in relation with the EU Soil Observatory. And for the next slide, just to remind the goal of this soil deal for Europe, we'll have different aspects of the soil concern as regards soil organic, carbon stock, the reduction of soil pollution, the prevention of soil erosion, to increase as well soil biodiversity. As you see, it will be a very comprehensive mission, and we could provide a good outcome and good output for the policymaker and for advisory system in touch with farmers. I will stop.
Thank you, Emmanuel. It seems that the policy and the practice are lining up towards the generative practice. That's a good thing. Thank you for sharing with us all this information, which means that it is a very topical thing that we're discussing this afternoon. Policy-wise, business-wise, and it requires collaboration. And that brings me to the last speaker. Last but not least, Martine van Weelden, because she will speak about collaboration. She is the Deep Agri-Food Collaboration Manager at the Capital Coalition, responsible for successful applications of capital thinking in the business sector. She has over 10 years experience in the field of sustainability, ecosystem services, and natural capital, and she is passionate about building partnerships with people from various backgrounds to support a societal transmission. And that includes natural, social, and human capital. Martine, we are very eager to hear from you.
Thank you, Martin, for this great introduction, and thank you for the organizers to invite me to this important meeting. So as Martin just mentioned, I'll be talking about the Deep Agri-Food for Business project. And maybe, as we've been hearing many abbreviations, TEEB stands for the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. So that's the project I'll be presenting on, and how this project actually enables regenerative transition within the food system. Next slide, please. I don't know if you were there this morning when Gerda Verburg mentioned that we need a system to introduce checks and balances, and that true cost accounting would be a way forward. In June of this year, we organized an independent dialogue with two of our partners, the UNEP-TEEB and the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, on true cost accounting and redefining value to transform decision-making. And as an outcome of that session, there were, many things were discussed, but of course, we've heard it before, land use and food production are not meeting people's nor nature's need. Food system issues are cross-cutting. And actually, there are already many methods in place. We now need action. And I'm very pleased that today, during this session alone, we heard a lot about action that is already taking place in Europe. And I'll be explaining a little bit more of the actions that we are taking within the TEEB for Business project. Next slide, please. So what's the challenge that we are facing? We are failing to address the global challenges of nature loss, climate change, and rising inequality because our economic system fails to recognize their dependence on nature, people, and society. So the solution that we support within the Capitals Coalition is that by 2030, the majority of business, but also financial institutions and governments will include the value of all their capitals in their decision-making, and that this will deliver a fairer, just, and more sustainable world. And our focus is very much on value rather than costs. I also heard people talk about like transforming the culture and how we, apologies, how we should transform the culture and of decision-making. And by talking about value, which is an incentive for people to transform, we think we will have a wider frame and wider scope to offer. Next slide, please. So the Capitals Coalition, I mentioned as already, is a global collaboration that redefines value to transform decision-making, and we sit at the heart of an extensive global network of many organizations. And we launched two protocols that you might be familiar with, the Natural Capital Protocol and the Social and Human Capital Protocol. We used to be the Natural Capital Coalition, but we decided in 2020 to merge into the Capitals Coalition to look at both natural, social, and human capital. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the capitals already, and capital, of course, has traditionally been thought of as only money. But capital actually describes any resource or asset that stores or provides value to people. So if we invest in the capitals, they create value, but if we degrade them, we erode the value. So within the Capitals Coalition, we commonly refer to 4 types of capital. And today we've been talking lots about natural capital. So that's the stock of renewable and non-renewable natural resources that combine to yield a flow of benefits to people. Soil is a natural capital stock. And we've been hearing about carbon sequestration. So that's a flow that soil provides. And that flow provides value to us as beings. It also provides nutrients as a flow that also provides value. So all these things can be measured and valued. Social capital we refer to as the glue that holds us together, building partnerships, for instance. Human capital, the knowledge, the competencies and skills that are embodied within humans. And produced capital also, in our terminology, includes financial capital, the human-made goods and financial assets that we use and that we commonly refer to. And we always state that natural capital really underpins all the other capitals, because if you think about it, and it's actually common sense, without natural capital, none of these other capitals would exist. Next slide, please. So the success of organizations around the world is really dependent on these capitals, and a capitals approach enables organizations to understand how their success is underpinned by the capitals, empowering them to make decisions that offer the greatest value across all the capitals. It's really about understanding the impacts and dependencies that each organization has on the capitals, and to understand also that there is a clear business case for the protection, and that this leads to cascading benefits throughout the system. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, I will speak a bit more about the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, the Agri-Food for Business project that I lead on within the Capitals Coalition. This is a part of a larger project that is led by the United Nations Environmental Programme and the TEEP office, and it's actually a project that is funded by the European Union, the DG Environment, actually. I just heard from the DG Ag. Would be great to work together with DG Ag as well, actually. Next slide, please. Yes. So the project that we run focuses on 7 partner countries across the world, 2 countries in Latin America and 5 in Asia. Unfortunately, it doesn't focus on the European Union yet, but as part of this project, we focus on several activities. So firstly, we drafted operational guidelines for business within the agri-food sector, so that they can have a framework to understand their impacts and dependencies on the capitals, and that they can measure and value these and also apply their insights. Secondly, we are building partnerships within all of these countries. The partners that we are working with within the countries are listed here. And we are providing training sessions to businesses in these countries, mostly agri-food businesses. And we help the businesses, to understand how to conduct a capitals assessment. And also we're supporting them in building pilot applications. So that's a really important element of our work. And I was really pleased to see some kind of pilots already popping up in earlier presentations as well. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the TEEP Agri-Food Operational Guidelines were drafted as part of our project, and it follows the 4-stage framework that is also part of the Natural Capital Protocol. And together with the TEEP Agri-Food Framework, these 2 elements really provide a methodology for true cost accounting, or true value accounting, I would rather say. So really looking at the frame stage, like, why should I be conducting a capitals assessment as a business? The scope stage, what should I be looking at? The measure and value stage, how should I be doing them? And most importantly, also the action, the apply stage, what do I do next once I have all this information? Which decisions do I take? Next slide, please. So one example that we have is we have a large database of businesses that are already conducting a capitals assessment, or have conducted a capitals assessment. One of them is Syngenta, and they carried out an assessment to explore the benefits of expanding a management system. And it showed that benefits of this system, that it restoring, preserving, and enhancing biodiversity. It improved water management, including fertilizer and pesticide management. And also their strategy prevented soil erosion. So they decided to expand the program and develop a tool to monitor performance adapted to local condition and cropping systems. Next slide, please. So we have many resources, as I mentioned, many case studies, and within our database that can serve as an example of this work. And also within the TEEP project, some pilot applications are now starting to come out. So if you're interested, please check our website, www.capitalscoalition.org. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to receiving your questions.
Okay, thank you, Martine, for your contribution and your actually, it's almost like an umbrella. How to
yes, indeed.
All the things in cooperation. We have ample of time for discussion, so I invite all the panelists to come up the floor and to act as a panel. We have a couple of questions, and I cluster them in three. A first cluster, I think, is for Sierko and for Roberto, related to two questions from the public. What are the most significant changes in your farm after transitioning of the regenerative system for you, Sierko, but also for you, Roberto, of the farm of your farmers? How does the quality of crops are compared with the previous system? Are there not noticeable changes? And what happens to the pesticide residues in a cover crops approach? Fully cover crops approach. Do we have less use of pesticides, or so? Questions to know more. Questions about, can it be so good? Sierko,
shall I start? Yes, thank you for very precise questions. First of all, as the soil is at the core of everything, and the soil health at the core of everything we do, we try to maximize the good things, maximize green cover, living plants, the photosynthesis, and minimize everything that could disturb the livelihood of the soil, to put it shortly. Maybe from a more practical, what we do to make this reality is that we try to go to the fields to observe, to ask questions, and then just try, maybe ask a colleague, how have you handled these kind of situations? It's an ongoing process. There is no book that you could read and then you would have the solutions to these questions. They are on your own hands, and you just have to begin the journey, I would say. And about the yields and their quality, we haven't seen any noticeable changes. Mostly we see the changes in our soil structure, as we have clay soils, and it is going for a much better, since there is now more livelihood in the soil. And the third question was about pesticide use. Shortly, I think there are other ways of handling things. We use pesticides. We are not an ecological in ecological production, but there are mechanical ways and many others. And for example, cover crops are very good. They bring much good to the mix, and I don't see them as something that would add our pesticides use.
Great. From my experience, I know that farmers convincing farmers, so that you have to work in a network, and you're doing that. And you as well, Roberto. Can you address these questions?
Yeah, well, talking about circular vision in the farmer, for the farmer in the farm, I mean, this change can improve all the system. I mean, we are not a farm, we are a company. We're working with farmers, but for us, for example, reducing waste, obtaining energy, obtaining compost is a way to have to close a circle. In terms of CB mix, for example, in terms of compost and biochar, we observed that the plant yield increased more or less 10-20%. This one can be also useful for farmers, and at the same time, we observe the soil needs less water, and we increase the organic carbon, especially in the arid soil in the south of Italy, where is a big issue with the temperature due to the climate change. Instead, talking about pesticide, I mean, is not correlated to our scope. I mean, depends if you are organic farmers or not, because if you doing organic agriculture, you don't use it, and the CB mix can give an improvement, but are two different stuff. I mean, is not a pesticide, organic pesticide. So yeah, that one honestly is another approach, is another item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for questioning this first cluster of questions. I know it's very rapid and very short, and only we're not in depth, but we'll for sure follow up to this discussion. But the next questions are about creating value to the credibility of regenerative agriculture, and I think for Andrew and Martine. Questions from Lupi Schrevel, Rudy Giorgio, and Jessica Lopez, and Angelo Antonio. So that is these three. How do you measure soil carbon? And if you measure stable or labile carbon, is a question. Is it also used for peat soils? What is the average timeline for the transition from conventional to regenerative? And are farmers willing to invest in that transitional period when the cost is before the return? The investment is before the return of carbon credits and other credits. Soil capital model. Can the simple CO2 calculators adapt to all parts of the world? Is there not a place-based dimension on it? Another question. I was wondering how the approach of you, Martine, discriminates from a well-known framework such as the 3 pillars of sustainability: people, profit, planet. Well, it's up to you both to condensate this in 2 answers. Can I ask you first, Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Martin, for the summary. I'll work back through them in the order that you presented. So the question about measurement comes up every time. Do you use models? Do you use direct soil measurement, or a combination of the two? In our case, we are using a combination of the two. So for now, we are using a model, the Cool Farm tool, that takes various information about the soil characteristics and the farming practices and models the impact on soil carbon. And we are requiring soil analysis at the beginning and the end of a 5-year program in soil capital carbon alongside that. And no, this model is not appropriate for use in peat soils, which somehow also relates to the question later on about, is this applicable anywhere around the world? In terms of the average timeline for the transition, I think a lot of people approach this with the transition to certified organic in mind and think about a classic 3-year transition. I don't know what Sierko would say, but in our experience, 3 years is quite aggressive for, quite quick for a soil that is very depleted of life to then be able to provide all of the nutrition and the resilience and the soil structure that a farmer would want to see. So we often look at a transition that takes longer, 5 to 7 years, gives the soil life longer to build up, and actually therefore allows for a more careful approach to making cost savings and reinvesting those in, for example, multi-species cover crops, so that there is profitability improvements every step of the journey. And then maybe just to close on the last question from Jessica, I've mentioned that the model that we use is not appropriate for use in peat soils, but otherwise we are using a model that is fairly transferable around the world. That's why we selected it, actually. And so that's enabled us to expand from France and Belgium into the UK this year. We are also, of course, in parallel looking at other models that and other measurement approaches that will continue to improve how we assess improvements in soil carbon in different ways.
Martina.
Yes, thank you. Maybe to add to this story, of course, the natural capital approach doesn't just look at soil or carbon, but we provide a framework on how to assess all the flows and value the flows that come out of the natural capital, such as the nutrients or the carbon sequestration. So there are various ways of measuring those, and then hence putting a value on those as well. Often people think about monetary valuation when we speak about these things, but what we notice within our project is that when we work with farmers and when we take them through the guidelines and the framework, that also qualitative and quantitative approaches can be used in order to put a value on the measures and to go forward. So often it's quite a common sense as well for farmers or for businesses to look at these measurement and valuation. And it doesn't always have to be monetary. And of course, carbon already is very much developed in how to measure and value that as compared to biodiversity or ecosystem services. There are various ways of doing this. There's also the ecosystem services valuation database, for instance. This is part of the ecosystem services partnership. So there's many approaches towards valuation that can be used for various reasons and inputs. And also this relates to the question on scalability. Carbon is easier to scale than biodiversity issues, for instance. So that's also something to take into account, that the countries that we work in might not have the same values towards ecosystem services as in other parts. So there's a lot there, a lot of variation. And what the last question about sustainability, that's a very interesting question, actually, because I think you said that I presented an umbrella overview of what is happening, but I think sustainability might be the umbrella of the umbrellas. And the capitals approach that we present is really about the value chain of a business. So looking at upstream and downstream operations and really getting insight in how a business impacts and depends on the capitals, and also how to value, and then also to change that and for better decision making. So it's very much an internal process that can then be addressed and improved. So I think that's the difference between the capitals approach and the 3 pillars of sustainability that are normally addressed. I hope that was a clear answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this this answer. Again, it's quick. There's much more to say, but we'll need to follow up this discussion later on, I think. Emmanuel, there are some questions related to the Commission's policy gap. I think the member states, are they free in how they quantify the positive negative impacts of agro-ecosystems? Have they a freedom to use their own assessment schemes, or is there some harmonization underway? Also, when it comes to organic agricultural certification, which is a corner in the Green Deal, the farm to fork, sorry.
Yes, it's a very, I would say, broad question, I would say, because in fact, in our CAP, there is a part as regards performance monitoring and evaluation system is part of the regulation. And will follow what member states will do based on some result indicators. That is, it will be a macro monitoring. That means based on their intervention as selected by member state, we'll have a monitoring about the number of hectares concerned by each intervention, and we'll have a classification of intervention by some result indicators. Some result indicator will dedicate to the carbon storage in the soil, or other will dedicate to the soil improvement and soil protection. That means there is some list of indicators based on some specific topic, to some specific area to address, and will classify intervention set by member state in relation with this result indicator. So we will have a global, say, monitoring. And we will have still a global monitoring as regards context and impact indicators, and we need to improve this indicator, but there is already some indicators on air pollution, on water quality, on soil erosion, on soil organic matter, but we need to dig on that and to improve our panel of indicators. But based on that, we will have a picture at member state level and at European level. After, I think, more will go in the next coming year. We want to have more information at the farm level. And there is today a survey for some farm. It's not all farm in Europe, but there is a significant number of farms involved in this survey, and we want to expand some criteria in the survey, because sometimes today is based on accounting system. We are able to follow the income, the margins, the cost of production at the farm level, and we want to expand the criteria. We will maybe able to know what will be the consumption of fertilizers, the consumption of pesticide at the farm. We will have more, I'll say, information at the farm management based on this survey. We will as well develop, but it will be a voluntary maybe scheme, but we will develop some, I would say, software in order to establish some balance at the farm level as regards the nutrient management or as regards the gas emission. During the reform, we wanted to promote a tool, a farm sustainable tool for nutrient, and there is we engage a contractor to develop that, and we wanted to put that in a GAEC as a compulsory, I would say, element to be there in member state and to be used by farmer. But in fact, member states were not ready to go in this direction. But it's just to say we try to develop some specific tool to be able to see more impact at the farm level.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. From my own experience, I think a dual approach is needed, because I see on the one hand a requirement for harmonization on critical performance indicators for the transition, but on the other hand, we also need a local specific place-based approach for farmers. Otherwise, it's not a performance indicator, but it's only a new regulations. And I think we have to find a balance there as well. Time is running. I have to wrap up this session. I thank all the speakers for their contribution, the audience for their interest and for questions. What I take out of this session is that there is a lot of inspiration, there is a lot of ambition, there is a lot of motivation to go along the lines of a next generation, a novel agricultural system in Europe, based on the principles of regenerative approach, but with high value, natural value for the natural capital, for the social capital, for all the kind of things that we have. There are pathways to credibility, to give the credits where and the rewards where they are earned. But we have to speed up to create a diversity in the rewarding system, to keep the inspiration, ambition, and motivation alive. Thank you all for attending this seminar. this session.